Good afternoon, everyone. It's not often that you can say the old cliche, my guest needs no introduction, but that is probably true in this case. Baroness Tanni Thompson is one of the legends of athletics. And I think if you have a look at a timeline that I composed after looking at her book, you'll understand why. Not only Britain's greatest wheelchair athlete, but she's shot to fame in the early 90s when she became one of the earliest and youngest winners of countless medals, christened Caris Davina Gray, but nicknamed Tanni, and we'll go on to talk about that in a minute. But for starting in 1988, so at the age of 19, she started in Paralympic sport and won the London Marathon 6 times. I wonder how many of us remember thrilling to the sight on our televisions of Tanni roaring to the front and staying there. All of those Olympics and Paralympic gold, they just stack up, a staggering clean sweep in those events. 16 Paralympic medals in all, 5 games. And look at that total, 11 gold, 4 silver, 1 bronze. And then in the World Championships, again, a great big medal haul, 30 world records on the tracks, a true all-rounder of athletics. And then alongside that and after sport, taking part in so many initiatives and so many important movements to safeguard, but not only disabled people, but disabled sport and sportsmen and women in general. Rewarded, of course, by becoming a dame and then a life peer, now in the House of Lords and speaking on all those topics. As I said, the greatest wheelchair athlete, but beyond that as well, she became a role model as well here, modeling, I think, for the Daily Mail, a picture I picked up from her book. Sports personality, she came 3rd in that event. Question of sport and the big red book for This Is Your Life, honoured as with an OBE, and now sitting in the House of Lords. And it's a great honour to welcome Dame Baroness Tanni Gray Thompson. Tanni, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It kind of all looks slightly weird when you put it like that, but yeah. That's lovely. And I'm actually in my office in the House of Lords at the moment, so which obviously looks really pretty. But there's lots of things going on, obviously at the moment. So yeah, I'm not going to be called to any business, but just to let you know where I am.
Yeah, Seize the Day, the name of your autobiography. Interesting in the way that nowadays we hear so many sports stars draw up a sort of to-do list of what they want to achieve in their sporting career and, tick the list off as they go past them. Was that ever the case with you, or was it more a question of what Seize the Day implies, that, you take it, make the best of your opportunities and then move on to the next one, or did you always have a life plan?
A bit of both, really. I mean, actually, one of the other suggestions was 3 wheels on my wagon, which we thought Seize the Day sounded more intellectual, but it sort of happened in steps, really. As a youngster, I wanted to play sports, and then kind of showed a bit of talent and joined a club, and then it was like, okay, I want to make the GB team, and then I wanted to do so it all happened in stages. Probably the biggest change for me came 17, 18 years old, made a big jump in performance, and then wasn't just about making the team. It was about, okay, how good can I be? And then from then on, it was about trying to maintain that. But my parents brought me up. I mean, they were amazing. For me, being a wheelchair user, it's a really positive thing in my life. It's not the same for everybody who becomes a wheelchair user. But, I was born with spina bifida. I could walk a little bit when I was young, then got paralysed. And, the method of getting me around then was basically a pushchair. And it was like, this is horrible, because my sister probably wouldn't take me where I wanted to go. And then I had a chair. So for me, the chair was, because I could move it under my own steam, that was this huge, it opened my world, because when I got paralysed, it felt like my world was being shut down. So, my parents just had this huge influence on my life, and they're amazing. And they just didn't let people discriminate against me, because the reality is there's still quite a lot of discrimination. Back then it was sometimes worse, not always, but they helped me develop resilience and some skills to deal with those people. And then sport adds more and more levels of resilience to it. The ups and downs of sport mean that you get used to dealing with tough things.
You said you were born with spina bifida. Can you explain what that is and how it really affected you and how it affects other people?
So it's one of those conditions, there's quite a big variety of impacts. So for me, I'm missing some vertebra at the back of my spine. The vertebra didn't grow properly to protect my spinal cord. So there's part of my spinal cord that's exposed. And then as I grew, my spine collapsed, and the vertebra I did have severed my spinal cord. So it's one of those things, actually, if I didn't have spina bifida, if I just had the curvature of I had the spina bifida on its own, I probably would have been able to move around a bit, because I had both. It didn't. So I got paralyzed when I was really young. I remember walking a bit. I remember falling over a lot, and that was hard. And I had calipers for a bit. I couldn't really walk. I couldn't do anything with them. I mean, I could stand up, but I couldn't carry a plate of food or a drink or a bag. So it didn't give me any independence. So although my spina bifida is relative, it comes with a few other issues. But you know, I think in some ways it was probably, if I was going to get paralyzed, it was probably better that it happened to me when I was younger. And having sort of 18 months where I lost the ability to walk gave me a chance to transition into using a chair. It wasn't this overnight, I suddenly can't do things. I became very adaptable. And also my parents wouldn't make our house wheelchair accessible, because my parents later said they didn't want to make it the only place I could live, because apparently I was quite an annoying child, my dad told me, when I was an adult. Can't believe that. But you know, they were good in that they were able to look forward to what my life could be like, you know. So they fought really hard to get me into mainstream school. They protected me from a lot of different things, taught me to be a bit stroppy when people were patronizing me, actually actively encouraged it. And you know, it's because I didn't have a period of time in hospital, I didn't go through rehab. That adjustment along the way, I think, helps, you know. And every time, you know, someone was horrible to me, my mum would just say, it's them, not you, you know, or just they're idiots. You go, oh. And actually that was a really positive environment.
Now, how much was it disruptive to keep having to go back to hospital for these operations? Because you had a metal rod put in your spine at some point.
Yeah, so I had, with the metal rods, I had to stop growing before they could put it on my spine. Because if I basically would have snapped if they put it on while I was growing. The lead up to that was pretty bad, a lot of pain. I mean, really, really horrible. But you sort of forget some of those moments. Actually, so I was to have the metal rod put on, I had a plaster cast jacket, which basically went round. They actually plaster cast over your head and then cut it off, but it went right down to my hips. We kind of later found out. So I was only in hospital for that for 3 weeks. And then we later found out when I went for one of my hospital visits, my doctor saying, oh, how's the homeschooling going? I thought, what do you mean homeschooling? He's like, oh, well, you've been homeschooled. I went, no, basically the day, 4 or 5 days after I came out of hospital, my mum sent me back to school. I was like, I'm not being homeschooled. Yeah. And he was like, oh. So I think my parents were a mixture of, you know, you can't miss 6 months of school. You know, if I'd had to be in hospital 6 months, that's different. Yeah. But you can't miss out on the social side, on the education, because as soon as you miss that much school, it's almost impossible to catch up. So education was a massive thing in our house. Dad used to say to me all the time, education gives you choices. And I have to say, as a kid, I was like, you know, and then you kind of realize, actually, he was right. And I did tell him, actually, he was right, probably when I was about 32. But anyway, that's another story.
But it says in the, you know, you mentioned in the book that your parents fought really hard to keep you in mainstream schooling. Were you aware of the struggles at the time, or was it just a question of, you know, of them making it as normal as possible, or was it really that you felt you were being pushed around a bit? Or
no, I was aware of it. We've always had really straight discussions about it, because I'd started off in mainstream school because I could walk, and then my head teacher just didn't tell anyone I was a wheelchair user, kind of kept it a bit of a secret. And then I thought I was going to go to the same school my sister was at, and then we had a letter saying, no, we don't take people like Tanni at our school. Great. And then we'd gone to look at a special school, and the children there didn't have any education. So it was back in the days of CSEs and O levels. The maximum I could have done in the special school was 4 CSEs: English language, home economics, religious studies, and obviously I can't remember the 4th one, but it wasn't maths, I don't think, you know. So my parents were like, "This, you can't go to this school, because if that's the most you can achieve, you haven't got a chance." So basically, my dad threatened to sue the Secretary of State for Wales. I mean, really tough stuff.
Yeah.
And they talked me all through this because, like, you have to understand it.
Yeah.
And bizarrely, well, there was a woman, Mary Warnock, Baroness Warnock. It was her work. She had, green paper out on education for disabled children, and my dad gave it to me and said, "You need to try and understand it." And actually, I just so happened, I mean, it's a different one now, I didn't realize my life would be made up of white and green papers, but Dad said, "You need to understand what's going on, because if someone comes and asks you, you need to give the right answer."
Yeah.
So they were really open about it. And, I ended up in a mainstream school, nowhere near where I lived. I did 10 O-levels, 4 A-levels. And I wouldn't have had that chance if I'd just been forced down the special school. And the reality is, a lot of children I saw at mainstream needed different education and didn't get it because they could walk. But the assumption was, because I was a wheelchair user, I didn't even deserve the chance of a decent education.
So was the school specially adapted? Was it happily well adapted, or did you just get around on your bum?
No, I mean, it wasn't adapted. I mean, it was really, they employed 6 women to carry the wheelchair users up and down the stairs. I mean, we didn't have a lift, or there were steps everywhere. And they've actually knocked the school down now, and they've built a really lovely modern one. But what we did have, I mean, the access was not great. We had a bunch of teachers that were amazing. So Mrs. Jones, Audrey Jones, scared the life out of us. She was deputy head. She was a really strong feminist. She used to bring in pupils who'd been to Oxford, Cambridge, women who'd been doing engineering degrees, ex-pupils, so brought them back. I also had an amazing PE teacher, Mrs. Cogbill, and we were so lucky. I mean, state school, we had a swimming pool. No idea how we had that. And I remember turning up to watch my friends do their PE lesson, and because I've been told I really shouldn't do it. And she was like, "Can you swim?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she went, "Right, bring your swimming costume next week." Yeah. So we talked about inclusive PE before the word existed. So they tried really hard to include me in just the whole part of school life, really. And so I didn't have teachers that closed me down as well, which was amazing as well when you think about it.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking now about access, a sidetrack. You're in the House of Lords, which is an ancient, much revered building, but what's the access like there?
So I work in a building that part of it goes back to 1079. Not much of it's left of that bit. Do you know what? It's probably the most accessible place I've ever worked. Really? So it's not always by the most direct route, but they've got lifts and ramps. And I did ask, it's funny, when I came, I asked for a ramp in this one part of the building, and they were like, no, listen, we can't do that. And then they came back and said, "Oh, we can probably put a temporary ramp in." And then I turned it when it was in, a full concrete ramp. Right. And I was like, temporary ramp is something bit of wood. And I said, "Sorry, I thought it was temporary." And they went, "Yeah, it'll only last about 50 years. That is temporary for the House of Lords." So what we've got here is a team of people who you go and explain to the House committees and say, "Look, this would make my life easier." And they go, "Okay, right." And they'll try and try and do something which really lovely as I mean, they can't fix every bit of the building, but they try really hard to.
Yeah, well, that's the excuse that quite a lot of people say. We've got an old building, so therefore we can't put a lift in, or we can't put a ramp in, or we can't give you access, and then just go, "Sorry, I'm digressing into more."
I don't care. Yeah, just do it. Yeah.
But yeah, let's go back to your sport-filled childhood, as you say. At what point did you think that's what I want to do? Obviously sport was very special to you, and did you try lots of different sports, or did you go straight into wheelchair athletics? How did sport grab you?
I'm smiling. No, I tried loads of sports, and at the beginning it was about being fit and active and pushing myself around, being strong enough to push my chair. And then I played loads of sports. I was completely shocking at most of them. So the highlight of my swim career is I failed to drown. Touch and go. I tried playing basketball, not very good, couldn't throw, catch or shoot. And then I did wheelchair racing, and that just grabbed me. There was a connection. And what's quite surreal is now, I'm 52 now, and I've just started playing basketball again. Still can't throw, catch or shoot. But I'm back into just being physically active again, which is important. But yeah, from the minute I did wheelchair racing, I'll be honest, I looked at it from the outside and went, just go around in circles, boring.
Yeah.
And then I tried it and it was like, wow. And so, you know, I say to youngsters, we do a lot of outreach from here to schools, say, you know, don't try stuff. And with sport as well, you know, there's a lot of people who try to push like the overnight success, and that's, it might happen for a tiny number of people. The reality is you spend a load of time training, developing, you know, learning the skills for you to be discovered. You know, I was discovered at 17, but I've been doing it since I was 12, you know. So I think there's a bit of reality about the steps up that, you know, you have to take to become good. So yeah, I couldn't play any other sport at all. Wheelchair racing was the only one I was good at.
So it was determination. You didn't immediately think, oh, I'm good at this. You kept working, kept training. How difficult was it to train? Because did you train on tracks or gyms, or how did you actually get around to do the training?
A bit on the track. I mean, my first club was Bridgends, and we didn't have a real track. We had a grass track. So that's a bit like running in sand, but Bridgends Athletics Club, the runners spent a lot of time training in sand anyway, sand dunes. So we used to go to Swansea twice a year, but trained on the road actually, and in the gym as well. So combination of weights and bodyweight exercises, but on the road. And, you know, had a couple of near misses with cars, but generally most cars are quite respectful of wheelchair athletes on the road. And it used to be gramming, really good fun. Not so much fun in the winter, but because we were doing about 100, well, certainly not when I was a teenager, but, you know, into the 90s, I was doing 150 miles a week on the road, right. You know, which when the sun's shining is lovely. In winter, it's pretty miserable. Yeah. But I mean, I say the best thing on a Sunday, we used to do a 30-mile training run. And when you're competing at that level, you can eat a box of 12 Jaffa cakes waiting for the pasta to boil. Sadly, these days I can't, but also sadly, I still think a portion size of Jaffa cakes is 12, not 3. I mean, 3 is just pathetic. So yeah, sadly, I'm not at that level anymore.
Yeah. But facilities must have improved for teenage wheelchair athletes. I mean, you've definitely found it pretty primitive, but they must have improved since then, surely.
They have. I mean, there's a lot more tracks, there's a lot more accessibility. A lot of companies now make accessible equipment. What I had in Bridgend was the club environment was great, really open, inclusive. I mean, our coach, Roy Anthony, he coached 40 hormonal teenage girls. I mean, he needed a knighthood. He was also a police officer. He used to joke that actually, you know, he used to go and do his police work with the rest from us. I mean, I don't know how he managed it. So, you know, the club environment was, they didn't care whether, so we had Steve Brace, who was one of the best marathon runners in the world. It didn't matter if you were the best in the world or you were someone who turned up, you know, once a month. The ethos in the club was brilliant.
And the facilities and the resources, I mean, you know, you'd imagine the late 80s, early 90s, the resources, facilities, technological aspects and so on must be light years away from what they are now. Was it very primitive? How primitive was it?
It didn't feel so at the time, but I mean, racing chairs back then, you could buy small, medium and large. And the rules at the time, you weren't allowed steering on the chair and you weren't allowed brakes, because the non-disabled people who set the rules said, if we had steering, it would encourage us to go too quickly, which is sort of slightly patronizing. So we used to have 8-inch casters. Yeah. And I remember doing a race at Portsmouth, going down this really big hill at about 35 miles an hour, holding the casters to turn them, which is not safe at all. So a big change came early 90s in terms of allowing, we weren't allowed 3 wheelchairs because they weren't safe. So the athletes pushed and pushed, and early 90s were allowed 3 wheelchairs. Then through the 90s, massive development. There's more tinkering around the edges now with different materials and carbon fiber and a bit of titanium. A big change came in the wheels that we use. We use, you know, disc cycling wheels. So yeah, it's been fascinating to see those changes in the sport. And the facilities got better. Obviously, like lottery funding, that's helped a lot as well. But you need to be on the level to get elite funding. There's still a challenge for all athletes to get to that point where you're funded.
Was it expensive to take up the sport then for a teenage girl? And is it expensive now? Presumably, with the cost of machines or wheelchairs and so on, it's even more expensive as something to take up.
Yeah, so my first racing shirt cost £565.
Wow.
That was in 1987. So yeah, that was a lot of money back then. And I would say, lucky growing up in Wales that I got some support to help buy that. My dad had a good job, but he couldn't afford that. So, the average chair is now £5,000 to £6,000. Hand bikes, I mean, you're talking carbon fiber bikes, but they're 8 to 10 grand, so the lottery funding's been amazing, but also what it's done for all sports, it's pushed up the price of being a bit lower down that pyramid. So, for sort of talent, what we call talent athletes, sort of 12 to 15, the average cost a year is about £10,000. And there's loads of families that can't even vaguely afford that. So are we getting the most talented children through across Olympic Paralympic? Probably not. So if I wave a magic wand, I'd try and bring that middle cost down, because, the thing is, when you're 12 and 13, you don't need the same chair that Dave Weir has. You don't. But there's a bit of an obsession, because you have to have the same to be. Actually, what you have to do is have a pretty decent chair and train hard and get a good coach.
Yeah. And is there more help for children coming into the sport now than there was when you started? Or is it still that initial thing where you've got to make the initial sacrifice of money and then sacrifice of time and energy and effort?
There's a bit more help. I think where there's a problem is that, the Paralympics have been amazing, but actually it's still hard for a lot of disabled children to do PE in schools and to get good access at a young age and to learn sort of the skills that you need. And it's still not necessarily that easy to join a club. So some clubs are great and very welcoming and some aren't. So, and then, a lot of disabled people think sport and activity is not for them. So having the Paralympics hasn't really changed some of those challenges. So, it's, we know it from women's sport that, seeing Jess Ennis or Kelly Holmes were, women look to those and go, wow, they're amazing, but they can't always see the steps they need to take to get there.
Yeah.
Whereas I love watching men's sport. You go and watch a group of 6-year-old men playing five-a-side and they score a goal.
Yeah.
And, they think they're Ronaldo.
Yeah.
So the connections are different. There's a lot of psychology in sport about how you get in and how you stay in.
Yeah. And I suppose from that point of view, that you also, a doorbell's going, but I'm going to ignore it. So what the heck? We looked at the timeline of all your successes. You didn't just specialize in sprinting or long distance or whatever. You won medals at all levels. Is that possible? I mean, in non-disabled sport, people, they're either sprinters or middle distance or long distance. You seem to be able to manage them all. Is that common across the board in wheelchair athletics, or were you a real freak?
No, I mean, it's completely common. So as a sport, although we compete over athletics distances, as a sport, we're more like cycling. So a lot of our technology comes from cycling, the helmets, the wheels, everything, brakes, all those sorts of things. So it's really what I was, although I was a sprinter. Probably the nearest comparison is Mark Cavendish, who does the Tour de France but can win stage races.
Yeah.
So that was it for me. So there's a probably 3 athletes in the world that only do 100 and 200. The fact I can name them, I think, shows pretty much everyone else. So for me, sprinting in wheelchair racing is 100, 200, 400, 800, potentially 1500. And there's a limit to the number of events you can do at a major games. But on the back of the training I did to be a sprinter, you can knock out marathons, and if you're in the right place, right time, and you get a slingshot, you can win. So if it's hard day, windy, I would struggle, but if there's a bit of protection, you can stay through for 26 minutes. And also you're going so much quicker than runners that someone like Paula Radcliffe would do 2 marathons a year. We could do 10, and it just doesn't hurt you in the same way because you're not using weight bearing muscles, so you recover much quicker as well. And
what I didn't know until I read your book was that, in a sense, the marathon funded your track pursuits because you got paid. It was appearance money, was it, in the marathon and so on?
There was a bit of prize money, but yeah, my road racing paid for everything else. Look, I mean, there's a lot better prize money now. I think one year for London, I won £600, but I had to spend 3 nights in a London hotel, which I had to pay for. But
Yeah.
I earned enough doing, and I had some sponsors where I was lucky, but that paid for me doing my track career. So it's nice to see there's more money. I mean, wheelchair tennis is a sport that is really good in terms of prize money integration. They have stuff at Wimbledon and US Open. They're really pushing the boundaries, which is quite exciting. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't change the time that I was involved. So although there's a bit more money and it's different, it was really fun time to be involved in the sport. And actually, if I was working or spending my own money, it focuses your mind, because every time I'd go and spend 2 months in America, my dad would say to me, "That's your pension you're spending."
Yeah.
Okay, Dad.
Yeah. Sure.
Right, got it. Understand.
But would never put you off.
No,
absolutely.
No.
Good. Did you need a different chair when you did sprint, the shorter distance, and the London Marathon? Would you have a different chair?
It's the same chair. The only thing that you change is the size of the push rim, because that in effect is like a fixed gear on a bike.
Yeah.
So depending what the profile of a road course is, you might go up or down a little bit in terms of hill climbing or going really fast downhill. So no, you wouldn't really change anything in terms and probably a chair would last a year, hopefully, if it didn't get damaged by the airlines.
Yeah.
So it'd be a new chair kind of every year.
And you had to be your own maintenance engineer. It's not like you have a Formula One pit team all ready to change your gears and your wheels and everything for you.
And so at major games, we might have someone who took a mechanic role, but for everything else, it's kind of me. My husband's actually very mechanically minded, so he was great. Yeah, you just sort of, if I'd be in the garage fixing something, you just go, and then he'd come and do it.
Yeah.
But no, I could fix it all. I can't weld, but I know how to tell someone how to weld. But I could pretty much fix everything. I'm pretty good at gluing carbon fiber back together, and I can true a wheel and all those things that, there are other people who can do it quicker. But yeah, and in the rules in racing was that if you punctured during a race, you had to change the tyre yourself. You are not allowed outside assistance.
Really?
So we used to do a reasonable amount of practicing of changing tyres when you're in the chair.
Yeah.
But you can't quite simulate the pressure in a race when you puncture, but we'd practice all those things.
Yeah. So what was the worst moment for you in that sense, when you had to suddenly repair your chair or change a tyre or whatever?
Oh, London Marathon one year where I broke away from a women's pack, and about 10-mile mark got a puncture, and then saw the whole of the women's pack go past me. And I'd actually stopped by St John's ambulance station, and they thought I was injured. I was like, no, I tried to get the tyre off, and it was so well stuck on I couldn't get it off. And I'd asked St John's ambulanceman, did he have a scissors? Because I was going to try and cut the tyre off. And he very politely said to me, no, you can't have it. And I was okay. He said, I'll cut it. It's like, no, I'm not allowed outside assistance. And he was then, this is St John's ambulance scissors. You need to be trained to use the scissors. So I might have just said, give me the scissors. I didn't swear, I didn't have. And then he went, so I did write afterwards and say, so I wasn't meaning to be rude, but so yeah, I changed the tyre, but by then the women's pack were gone. So, but
yeah, and you mentioned brakes and things. How is it when you're going down a steep hill at 35, 40 miles an hour, and something untoward happens? Because it does happen. I mean, probably not in the bigger races, but certainly when you're training, somebody comes out where you didn't expect them to, or whatever. How do you actually stop, swerve, change direction, avoid terrible accident?
So at high speed, brakes don't work because they're on the front wheel, so they're more of a slowing brake than a stopping brake. If you've got to stop quickly, you have to grab the back wheels. So the gloves we had, they're kind of plastic. Actually, they're quite complicated. They don't look like gloves, but you just actually have to grab the back wheels. Or training on the road, you just had to watch all the time for cars. So I did get hit in my career twice by cars. Both times I could sort of just about see it come in, so I was able to sort of take some avoidance, some precautions. But I mean, it was not funny, but there was one time, it was just before my last Commonwealth Games, 2006, and I was training in Cardiff, and I got hit by a car, and the driver was going quite slowly, so it was more nudged, and I cut the back of my hand quite badly. I thought I had snot on my face, so did that. Actually spread the blood all over my face. Was just lying on the road being very careful about how I moved. So this poor woman thought that she'd killed me. She fainted. And then sort of it was all a bit, I mean, it was not funny, but I mean, for her to think that was horrendous. But yeah, in the end I was going, no, I'm not. Anyway, yeah, you just have to be careful. And, you know, I've had friends killed on the road, and you're kind of conscious that you just have to be really careful when you do what you do.
The London Marathon's on the roads, 26 miles or whatever. I've been along to support runners, charity runners and so on. And, you know, having been there and watched it on television, it has got this special magic and aura, certainly for those of us who watch. What's it like for those who compete in it?
If you're having a good day, it's amazing. It's just incredible, because I was very lucky. I had lots of people shouting my name, and that was nice. And I remember one year I was having a good day and I was pushing, there were some men in the pack with me, and, you know, lots of people shouting my name. One of the Welsh lads said to me, I'm sick to death of hearing your name. And it's very motivational. If you're having a bad day, not so good. So I remember going over the cobbles one year quite slowly near Tower Bridge, and someone shouting at me, you'll feel better if you smile.
Oh, charming.
But, you know, I mean, yeah, London is the best marathon in the world. There is, you know, I've done LA and I've done Boston and Berlin, and London is the best for crowd support.
Brilliant. And yeah, you're talking about chanting your name, and that was the question I was going to ask you to clear up. Why are you called Tanni?
Oh, so I was christened Caris, and my older sister was told I was going to get another baby, and she was very excited, and my parents thought they were just brilliant parents, because Sean would go around telling everyone there was going to be another baby. And when I came home from hospital, Sean stood next to the crib and went, ugh, it's tiny. So she thought it was going to be someone her size to play with, and stood there for about 2 days going, ugh, it's tiny, it's tiny, it's tiny. Eventually turned into Tanni. And then when my parents said to her for about another couple of days, look, the baby's Caris, Sean said, no, it's Tanni. And then my parents thought it was easier to change my name. And then my sister was apparently an absolute delight. So it's all Sean's fault.
So you're happy with the name Tanni, but your daughter's Caris.
Yeah, so I was living in England. I returned to Wales. So my baby was born in Wales, just in case my child wants to play rugby, and, you know, to be sure of national identity. That sounds a bit weird when you say it, but we did a whole host of names, and I really wanted a Welsh name. And to be honest, my husband is from Yorkshire, more really badly. So he couldn't say Harrod or Siriol or Seren, and Caris was the best one he could pronounce.
Oh, a romantic way of choosing a baby.
It's lovely. It's like beloved child. So it's a lovely name. So I don't think of it as my name, because I've never been called it. So it is a lovely, lovely name.
And I hope I emphasised in the introduction that your success as a wheelchair athlete, and, you know, I think it's fair to say you're the one who put wheelchair athletics on the map, led for you to so many other things: the fashion model shoot, the question of sport, this is your life, all of those sorts of things came on the back of your success. How much did you welcome them, or feel them as, you know, goes with the territory, got to put up with them? Did you welcome the fame and the interest in you and in wheelchair racing?
To be honest, most of it is really nice and lovely. And the picture of me in that red dress, I was smiling when you were saying it, because when I was competing, my shoulders were quite big, and actually that dress didn't fit me because my shoulders were really broad. So it's actually done up at the back with shoulder clips, and they'd sent this beautiful pair of Jimmy Choo shoes, which didn't go on my feet either. So they're just, actually I'm wearing trainers underneath the dress. But then the other thing with that, that was after Sydney, very short hair, dyed my hair red, bad move. I was also on the list of 50 worst hair colours on the base of that picture. So it's like, so there's, most of it's not. I mean, I think that a lot of people, you know, I don't have paparazzi sitting outside my door. You know, I have had people publish not great pictures of me, or, you know, I don't have some of the that athletes now have. So I think I'm quite, but I think there's also, you have relationship with journalists and people, and, you know, I've been in supermarkets trying to take a picture, and you just try and do it and move on. You know, there's a couple of companies thinking, I wish I'd brushed my hair before I gone to the supermarket. But anyway, that's most of it's okay. There's a bit of it that's nasty, but not very much of it at all.
And how do you react to the sort of the role model label that is sort of inevitably pinned on all sports stars, that, you know, you're expected to be a role model for all sorts of things as well as just being a terrific athlete?
I mean, it comes with some, so, you know, I do try to be really polite to people, even when they're incredibly rude to me, because if you react, then, you know, that I don't come out of it well, actually, you know. So there's some things like that you don't think about it, because I also recognize that I had lots of people who helped me on the way in a right place, right time, that helped me get there. But I do think it comes with the responsibility, you know, to actually, this comes from Roy, my first coach, and my parents, to kind of give something back, to pay it forward, or, you know, lots of terms around that. It does come with, it's not too much, but it does come with, I think, you need to behave in a certain way. But that's kind of the world I grew up in as well.
And did you welcome the interest in all other aspects of your life, and welcome going on Question of Sport and This Is Your Life and all of those things? Did you welcome the spin-off that your success gave you?
A lot of it's really good fun. Except, I mean, the thing is, the first time I was on Question of Sport, I was on Bill Beaumont's team with Frank Bruno, and we were the team that lost by the most series. So you come out of those thinking, just let me answer the question on my own sport, right? You know, that's what you kind of hope. This Is Your Life was fascinating.
Yeah, I want to ask about that.
They rang my husband and said, do you think Tanni will want to do it? And he was like, no. And they rang my mum, who was like, yes.
Yeah.
Because mum, you know, so for my mum, it was, some interesting people came to that.
Was it really a secret? Because that's the idea, is that they spring it on you as a surprise. Did you have any idea?
Not a clue. Absolute. And the fact that my mum kept it a secret was amazing. So not a clue. So we'd filmed Question of Sport, and then right at the end, one of my teammates said, you'll never guess who someone on the other team is going to be done for This Is Your Life. And I was like, no way. Oh, that's horrendous. And then my glass ball walked towards me, and it's like,
uh-oh. Yeah.
But actually, I have to say, best after party ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The actual experience itself, was it embarrassing or good, or a bit stage managed? I mean, how does it feel?
It's a bit weird. I mean, somebody came on the program who didn't particularly like me, so that was quite interesting. You go, oh, okay. Yeah. I tell you, you get a book with photos in, and that's amazing. What was really lovely, there were loads of people who didn't make it onto the program, but they'd invited lots of friends and training partners, and the party afterwards was amazing, because there was just lots of people who I cared about around, and it was kind of nice to be able to say hello and thank you. And so ultimately the experience was great. It's just, you never know who's going to come next, and then you also, you know, it's like the big reveal at the end and things. I'm a bit of a control freak, so it's probably best that I didn't know who was coming.
It's still a great honor, and, you know, one that happens to comparatively few people. So fantastic to have it, you know, and to have the book of pictures and everything as you said. But what about the sports personality event? I mean, I have to ask you, I was actually in the audience at the time, and I remember now the collective gasp of horror when you were awarded the third place, and everybody realized that you weren't going to be able to get on the stage. And yet, reading your book, you say that actually that was a very positive thing. How do you explain that?
So earlier in the evening, I've been given the Helen Rollison Award. So I thought, okay, I mean, lovely. She was amazing and huge supporter of the Paralympic movement. Okay, so that means I'm not going to finish in the top three. And then when my name was read out, it was like, there's no ramp. And it was like, and the studio was quite dark, and there were loads of wheelchair users. So for Alan Shearer, poor love, I mean, you could see him just looking like, where is she? So not great at that moment in time. And then afterwards I had, I mean, this is name dropping, there's no way around it, but Kelly Holmes came up to me, and she'd been sitting next to Sally Gunnell, who was quite heavily pregnant. And Cal was like, we were going to come down and pick you up and put you on the stage. And she said, the only person next to me was Sally. And it's like, I'm not asking Sally at sort of 8 months pregnant. And then Matt Pinsent sort of said, did you not want to go on stage? That by that point, when he was looking at it, he realized Steve Redgrave was going to win because the camera was on Steve. And he was like, I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know whether, you know, should I come down and pick you up or what? So it's really lovely that lots of people cared in that moment. And then you realize it was less than 10 minutes after the program ended, someone very high up in the BBC came to me, who wouldn't normally speak to me, who came and said, we need a chat. And they had a huge number of complaints very quickly. So the good stuff that came out of it was they employed a person and a number of people across the organisation whose job was to look at how disabled people contribute to all aspects of the BBC. And they employed someone whose job was to get more Paralympic and disability sport across all channels. So what came out of it was really good. So there was no, you know, have a hissy fit, doesn't change stuff. Actually sitting in a room with the people from the BBC I would have at that point never have got into a room with to say, okay, what are you going to do? Was, you know, that was the most important thing. And the other bit was got trophy. You know, it was lovely. It was really lovely.
And I suppose it takes events like that and going on to the Paralympics, which brings things home to people in a way that, you know, all of the directives and missives and policy statements and things don't do. So, you know, think about the Paralympics in London. By that stage, I was a wheelchair user myself. And the difference before Paralympics and after was just the way people actually engaged me and looked at me. But before but the Paralympics was such a big spread of publicity and events and showcasing, if you like, wheelchair users, that suddenly people were actually going, you know, looking at it from our own eyes. Is that how you felt it?
I mean, having Seb as chair of the bid and Paul Dighton as chief exec, because they just got the Paralympics. So right from winning the bid, it was like 2 games, same feel. You are not going to have this sort of second class feeling at the Paralympics. And so that came very, very strongly from the top. But also the stuff that is probably a bit forgotten now is, you know, things like Green Park and King's Cross. Their tube upgrade was accelerated because of the games. So wheelchair access was accelerated. There was a huge amount of work done on the South Bank in London to relay cobbles, because the South Bank used to be a nightmare. I mean, there's still, which is not, but enabled lots of things to happen on the back of the games. And they were stunning. I mean, there's still lots of things that hasn't fixed everything, hasn't fixed discrimination. There's bits of the Northern Line I can't get on, you know, so it hasn't, but it allows a different conversation, which I think is important to have. I mean, they were just the best games ever. I've been to how many games? 8? Can't remember. Might be 9. And you know, 5 as an athlete, and then I've worked at everyone since. So you see the differences. I think with London, it was genuine. You know, for the athletes, there would be no difference, and that's a massive step forward.
Yeah. And I think, as I said, it helped with the attitudes towards people in wheelchairs, certainly. But did it help, we mentioned this earlier, the overall development of Paralympic sport? Because we mentioned again how difficult and expensive it was to take up as new sport, how now the Paralympic athletes, you can see them and say, that person, Dave Weir or yourself, they are phenomenal physical specimens. I've had a lot of people who are disabled say, you know, I can't match that. It's like a non-disabled person saying, Usain Bolt, he's not in the same planet as me. Is that what is happening with Paralympic sport as well?
It's quite complicated, because I think now a lot of disabled children, the options they're being given is, oh, you can be a Paralympian.
Yeah.
But it's actually reality. It's only for a tiny number of people. So, you know, we should be telling disabled children that they can be lawyers, teachers, you know, lots of other things. Sport's not that kind of quick fix. You've also got to be talented and want to do it and train really hard. So it feels sometimes a little bit that it can be a bit tokenistic around, you know, you could be a Paralympian. And I think it was last year, so the European Space Agency announced they were going to send a disabled person into space, and I had all these phone calls saying, you're really excited. And it was like, doesn't change my life, you know, lovely for the person who gets to be that. But I said, all the requests that I had, I said, you need to go and talk to somebody from one of those agencies that's involved in space, and talk to someone who's got a double PhD, who's disabled in astrophysics or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The reality is there's not that many people because of all the barriers that lead to that point. So, it's, some of it can be a little bit tick box because we don't have that development beneath. So, the fact that I couldn't, even over a period of a week, go and find many people who have expertise in the space industry and are disabled shows some of the barriers. So I end up sort of conscious I sound a bit grumpy about some of this, but going back to what you said about trains, it's like when I was in my 20s, I was promised that January the 1st, 2020, trains would be accessible. I said, okay, so now it's 2070.
Yeah.
So in my lifetime, I will not be able to get on a train on my own. And that's quite stark, actually, because we've come a long way, but we're not there yet.
And how much does that inform your public life now, your working life as a Baroness in the House of Lords? How much does that inform what you do and how you approach things?
It has a massive impact because this is a very privileged place to be. Although you're not always saying that when you hear it up at 3 a.m. And the reality is I don't win a lot of votes because it's pretty hard stuff that I work on. So I think it's important to kind of maintain the resilience and keep looking forward. I'm working on building safety at the moment, which I am not an expert in. But this is legislation that's come on the back of Grenfell Tower fire. 40% of the disabled people who lived in Grenfell died there. And you read and you go, okay, so we need to work on better evacuation. And so my lived experience has a big impact, but also lots of people get in touch with me to tell me what they're going through. So, which is really helpful. I'm not an expert on everything. And my experience, I'm treated 3 ways, really. Treated one way as an ex-athlete, generally quite nice. One way as a parliamentarian, people like me or hate me, not much in the middle. And then the third way is a disabled woman. So for me, that context is really helpful to be able to just see the different experiences that disabled people get.
So what do you think are the big challenges in the short term, the medium term, and ultimately the long term?
I mean, to make trains step free is billions of pounds of investment. But actually, if there was better staff training, then that would go a really long way to making a difference. So instead of, trying to get on a train and some, jobs were saying, did you book? Do you really have to travel? I had someone down say, don't go on the tube, hop at 7 a.m. because it's rush hour, because people have got jobs to go to. Going to Westminster, I've got a job. But yeah. So, you just sort of breathe, be polite back. I think attitude is a big part of it. I think there are quicker wins on access that the Equality Act doesn't go far enough. If I had to pick one area, it'd be education, because actually twice as number of disabled people are out of work than the working age average. So, there's lots of things that come back to early life education and knocking down attitudes. But, there's some research recently that says, a lot of people haven't spoken to a disabled person, kind of frightened to, and so they don't know what to do. So, if someone who's 95 comes up to me and says, so what's wrong with you then? Yeah. It's probably, my reaction is slightly different from someone who's 25 who says that. Yeah. My response to those things is usually, I'm Welsh. Oh, sorry, did you mean wheelchairs? Oh. So I try and deal with it in a different way. But we've got to educate people that it's not just Paralympians. There's a lot of other stuff that's happening out there.
Yeah, if you had a magic wand and you were allowed to wave it over education, what immediate goals would you want them to achieve now?
I think this is education for everyone, just making sure young people get the chance to get the best education that they can. I mean, the reality is a lot of people aren't disabled in school. That comes, later on in life. So I think educating children to understand that being disabled is not the end of the world. There are challenges with it. I had someone come up to me a while ago and say, if my life was like yours, I'd kill myself. My life's okay. Just let's have a bit of a chat about your assumptions. Yeah. So there's stuff we need to do to make disabled people both visible and invisible, because there's different issues there. But let's have an open conversation about disability, not necessarily think, don't make assumptions.
Yeah. And is there signs of progress? Are we moving forward, or is it 2 steps forward, 1 step back? What's your take?
That could be a 45-minute discussion.
Yeah.
No, I think there's definitely stuff that is better. Absolutely. Drop curbs, accessible toilets, those things. I remember coming to London as a 7-year-old and there were no accessible toilets anywhere. So, that there are things that are better.
Yeah.
I still think sometimes the attitude hasn't improved. So, I thought our moment for change was going to be during the first lockdown, when do not attempt resuscitation orders on disabled people. I thought that might be our moment for people to step and go, hang on a minute, but that didn't happen. Some people just went. And so we're still waiting for our moment to achieve real change. The Equality Act is all right, but it doesn't go far enough actually in terms of helping us get genuine equality.
Is it a question of educating, changing a mindset? Than simply saying this is the law now, because in my very small experience, it's how people approach things rather than what, if they say we've got to do this because the law tells us, but if they go in with attitude, how can I help you, or how can I make life better for you, it becomes a whole different ballgame.
Exactly. And a friend of mine, who's a wheelchair user, is going to Amsterdam in the next couple of months, wanted to go for a spa day, got in touch, and within I think it was less than 15 minutes, somebody from the spa had sent her a video of the access for her to be able to see whether she could use it or not. And there's a couple of steps, and like, we'll buy a ramp and go. I'm not expecting, everywhere to be step free, but actually thinking, what, if I'm never near Amsterdam, I am going to that place.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. It's the attitude makes a huge difference. And rather than saying, we're an inconvenience, it's like, okay, how can I make your life easier? That would go a long way to making our lives easier.
Yeah. I mean, you've always been positive about that right from the very beginning, and reading about your parents and how they helped you to be so positive. Is that are you still positive? Do you see problems how they can be solved rather than go, I can't do that, I can't do that? What's your attitude in that respect?
Good question. Mostly positive. I mean, there are times when I'm not, where it's like, there's times I get frustrated, but then it's like, okay, being frustrated doesn't change things.
Yeah.
Sometimes being grumpy does. So, I have been known to tweet quite a lot about trains and bad access. And then when my sister sends me a picture of a gremlin, that usually means that I'm being a bit too grumpy and I need to step back a bit. So it's finding levers to try and bring about change, because actually the world doesn't quickly or easily change to difference. And that's what we need to do. So there are times where it's hard, but then it's like, okay, I think I have one life. That's my personal view. And it's like, I have to make the most of it. And I have to, this came from my parents, which was, they pretty much told me all the time what privilege I had through education, through that. And I do, yeah. And it's okay, well, what are you going to do to make sure? I don't want the 12-year-old equivalent of me, having to fight for the same stuff that I did, and while I've got a platform, I try and use it.
Brilliant, and that's great you do. We're coming, unfortunately, near to the end of our lovely chat, and there's a couple of questions coming. Well, I mean, you're the role model for so many people and so many young athletes in wheelchairs. Who was your role model? Who did you look up to? Who did inspired you when you were growing up?
There was a Welsh wheelchair athlete called Chris Hallam. I watched him win the London Marathon in my teens and was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And he had an appalling taste in leopard print bodysuits and dyed blonde hair. And he was loud and obnoxious and rude. And he was one of my best friends in sport. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he challenged the view at the time of disabled people can't be sporty or athletic, or he could be really caring. He was a really caring person. but he just did not tolerate people being rude to me. And actually, I learned a lot from him about what to do, but also he broke down loads of barriers that when I came through as a young athlete who wasn't hopefully rude, you know, he helped channel that frustration in a really positive way. He was amazing, absolutely amazing guy.
Do you look back on your Paralympic times and bathe in the nostalgia? Are you a looking forward type of person? Do you put them in their place? How do you deal with such a fantastic catalogue of success in your sporting life?
I look forward, you know, the only time I think about my sporting career is when I talk about it on stuff like this. So, yeah. I mean, it's I had a fab time. I mean, there's bits, you know, it's beyond medal stuff. Traveling the world, meeting people, going to places that I would never have got to. That's amazing. You know, I've been to Rwanda and Jordan and Israel and Palestine and Lebanon and, you know, places that I wouldn't have gone. So I kind of learned from those moments. So definitely look forward, although me going back to playing basketball has been a real leveler, because the team I'm playing, one of the kids said to me last week, have you ever done any sports? Yeah, a bit. And he was like, oh, I think you're the same age as my grandmother.
Oh, correct.
Oh, thank you. And then his mum took him to one side and was like, she had a phone and she was going,
yeah.
But you know, I don't need to do, you know, it's cool, it's good.
Yeah, but your website describes you as Paralympian, crossbench peer, motivational speaker, broadcaster, and mother. So there's many strings to your bow. How are you managing to balance them all, and do you feel happy in the way you're doing it?
Mostly complete chaos, to be perfectly honest. I mean, my daughter's 20 now, which is just, it's easier because she's at university, and you know, trying to manage being away from home, either as an athlete or you know, now in politics, some of that was difficult. You can protect things like school days, sports days, but there's lots of stuff that you miss out on. I think for Caris, she doesn't know any different.
Yeah.
So, you know, as a mum, you feel guilty for being away, being home, working, not working, you know, but actually, you know, she just gets on with it, really. So there's time when I have really great work-life balance, and there's time when it's atrocious. And I remember I was kind of in my office one night, I don't know, about 9 o'clock, trying to write a speech on something that was really important in legislation, and Caris rang me, absolutely bawling her eyes out. And in that moment, you just got, I'm the worst mother ever. And it's like, Caris, what's wrong? Is it because I'm away? And she went, I can't find my hockey boots. Dad's hidden them. Right, I really don't think he has. And then she said, can I FaceTime you? I went, okay, FaceTime me. And then she walked around the house with her phone for me to find a hockey boots.
Oh, brilliant.
And you go,
that's what parents are for.
Found them in the garage where I told her to look for them. So you have these moments where you go, and then, you know, she's also had a lot of privilege being able to travel and do stuff that she wouldn't go. So yeah, I mean, the balance is it's not easy, but that's, you know, same being here up to 3 a.m, it's not a bundle of laughs, but it's the price you pay for the ability to go into the chamber and say to everyone in the chamber, no, do this.
We've had lots and lots of messages and questions which I haven't been able to read out yet, but time is running away with us, and everybody's saying what a wonderful, inspirational talk this has been, and thank you so much. You mentioned in your website that you're a motivational speaker. What is your key message to people? You know, what do you say is a sort of a strap line of your message?
Don't be afraid to try. You know, it's really easy to go, oh, I don't think I'd be good at that, or that's hard, or, you know, this immediate success stuff, which is nonsense. You know, you've got to work hard, and there'll be some really miserable times, but find something you're doing that you care about, you know, whatever that is, because you're not always going to love it, but you've got to like it. Well, no, or maybe the other way around, whatever way that is. Yeah. So, you know, and I think it's be honest with yourself about whether you're really trying. So my family motto is aim high, even if hit a cabbage. Long story behind that, but you know, just give stuff a go.
Brilliant. Thank you so much indeed, Tanni. It's been wonderful talking to you. I know from the messages that have appeared that our audience have really enjoyed it as well. And it's just remains for me to wish you all the best, particularly in getting better deals for disabled people and wheelchair users and train users and all of that sort of thing. Thank you so much for all the efforts you're putting in the first place. And thank you very much indeed for talking to me today. Thanks a lot, Tanni.
Thank you so much.